Today is a historic day for the cathedral city and port of Gloucester and the United Kingdom. We will finally be leaving the European Union this evening at 11 p.m. This, the 31st day of January in the year of our Lord, 2020. The departure from the aforesaid is honouring the 2016 referendum in which Gloucester voted heavily to leave. Let us therefore hope and pray that those in positions of authority in government are given wisdom as they take mercantile Elizabethan Windsor Britain forward, and the ability also given them to help reconcile Remainers and Leavers, helping them both come together for the common good and be of good cheer. God preserve Her Britannic Majesty Elizabeth II. God save the Queen.
We met, goodness me, it's almost 30 years ago. Richard, you've done stalwart work. You've all done great work. Just, I tell you what, don't worry about the detail that comes afterwards. The big point is this. 11 o'clock, we pass the point of no return. There is no going back. It's great for us. I hope it means the end of the European Union too. Celebrate, have fun, be happy, be British, be free.
Hello Gloucester. Happy Brexit Day, and thank you very much for all you did to make this day possible, for all the hard work you put in to the elections, and for just staying with us when the going was rough. And it's all down to people like you. I'm sorry I can't be with you. I hope you have a great party. I'll be in Parliament Square. But we can all join in spirit across the nation in the knowledge that today is the first day of British independence.
Enjoy your evening. That's enough of that. That was brilliant.
I made dinner in the evening. Bruce stands up, and he does his presentation. And he mentions that he got. That's how I would like
that second, we got British.
Let's do it properly. Cheers, gentlemen.
It was an Arab invention.
And be in Parliament Square in the rain and listening to Nigel Farage, but we're not here listening to ourselves. We are now celebrating our night that we fought for between 40 and 4 years. I don't really care, but what a war. And we've won. And this is about us. We told the press to embark over at 6:30. Those women's our night were turning up at 6:30 when we told you to start till 7:30. But we've got over that. I want to talk about what's on offer tonight. The punch you must try. The cocktails, they are amazing, the names of them and all. But also at 8:30, the cold of the buffet will be coming down. And by 9 at the latest, the hot world. We have a veritable smorgasbord of European food mixed with some Japanese, and we've even got as far as to doing frogs' legs tempura style to make sure we're properly international. Because I believe what we've done is create democracy, independence, freedom, sovereignty, everything we've ever fought for, because now we're going to go out and trade with the world. We have not turned our back on Europe, we've turned our back on the evil EU. The most vile institution of corruption that's existed for years, and we're free! And so I want you to enjoy the night. I have some more free vouchers on me for the punch and the cocktails. Get stuck in. We really must realise that what we've accomplished, and for me it's been, I can't remember how many years, but also it's important to say tonight that we have spent hours, actually we, Brian, where are you? him. Hours compiling what is a smorgasbord of film of what we've done over the years. A bit of this, a bit of that, a bit of everything, and we're going to be putting it on as dinner's being served. So you can either sit in there, listen to it, or be up here, hubbubbing. But at 11 o'clock, we will be having Big Ben, thank you to Brian, playing, because we've recorded it, or Brian has found it somewhere, striking 11. At 11, I expect you to charge your glasses. We have, actually, it's Prosecco, it's Italian, I was going to say champagne, French, it doesn't matter. But we have that. And that is important, that we are going to charge our glasses about, I don't know, 5, 10 to 11? Yeah? Yeah. And then we are going to listen to Big Ben. Most importantly, enjoy yourselves. If the press come back, don't be gloating over everybody else. Let's be magnanimous in victory, and let them be glorious in defeat.
Welcome to BBC Points West.
Andy Howard there, thanks very much from Western Superwear. With me now are two former parliamentary candidates for the Brexit Party, Christina Simmons from Cheltenham and Richard Ford, who's the chair of the Brexit Party here in Gloucester. Christina, I know you're celebrating tonight. Does part of you feel a little bit responsible for the division in this country from what you've campaigned for?
No, because I think it's fair that in any argument there are people on both sides of it, and as long as the argument is polite, I think it's fine that you have that debate. It's healthy, and I think tonight's a celebration for everybody in terms of democracy, because the democratic vote is being respected, and you can't pick and choose which one you respect.
But are you going to try and do something to heal that division now that the line in the sand has been drawn?
Well, I hope very much that it will heal, and it's not really down to us locally so much as what happens nationally. But yeah, we will do whatever we can, I think, to try and bring people back together, because we are one nation. We need to stay as one nation.
Richard Ford, Boris Johnson said today this is one of the greatest days of his life. Do you trust him to deliver the Brexit that you wanted?
Well, I don't trust the Tories at all, no. I mean, the fact is they need the Brexit Party behind them to make sure they deliver. Of course, we had Theresa May. Boris is better than Theresa May, but then who wouldn't be? But the fact of the matter is the Tories need the Brexit Party there to police them, to keep the pressure on, to make them make sure that it happens, because otherwise we don't trust the Tories. And, of course, at the moment, we're only half in, half out. There's another 11 months of being within. We'll have no representation and all the costs. So it's very clear we need the Brexit Party to keep the pressure on. You can't trust Boris. We need the Brexit Party, and I'm very confident that Nigel Farage will do that.
OK, well, you've had good support from Anne Widdecombe tonight. So, Christina and Richard, thanks for letting us be part of this evening. I'll let you get back to the celebrations.
Andrew Plant is in Gloucester for us this evening.
Yeah, so is it celebration or sorrow here in Gloucester? In this part of Gloucester, at least, it is the former tonight, because they are having a Brexit party here. Lots of different foods from across the European Union as they celebrate leaving the European Union tonight here. Our Points West cameras were here actually 3.5 years ago on the night of the referendum, way into the small hours, and lots of the people who were there that night 3.5 years ago are here again tonight. One of them, Richard Ford, joins us here. Richard, thanks very much for joining us again.
Welcome.
Is this the kind of Brexit you're expecting?
Well, no, we expected a clean break Brexit 3.5 years ago after the referendum, but the fact of the matter is it's the best we're going to get for the moment. But, you know, Nigel Farage has said we're there, we're waiting, we're keeping a watching brief, and obviously Boris Johnson has no excuse. He has a big parliamentary majority now, and he has to deliver. You know, now we're entering a transition period, 11 months. We've got the costs still of the European Union. We don't have any of the say in terms of our MEPs having stood down. So it's a strange situation for us to be in. Frankly, we should have left 3.5 years ago after the referendum. It was a clear result in the referendum. The fact of the matter is that we didn't do so. That's down to the weakness of Theresa May and the Conservatives at the time. We don't trust the Conservatives enough to deliver, but we'll wait and see what happens. But if they don't deliver, Boris has a majority. If he doesn't deliver, we'll be back, and Nigel has said that.
OK, Richard, thanks very much indeed. Well, obviously, those views not shared all the way across the West Country. Well, they've also got a list of Brexit cocktails you can choose from at the bar here. They're also, I'm told, listening to messages tonight from Anne Widdecombe and Nigel Farage to the party here in Gloucester. Looks like it's going to go on into the wee small hours.
Overseas aid, while cutting it at home, was scarcely more popular, with the growing number tempted to back UKIP, a party that was winning more and more support, even though he'd once dismissed them as a home for fruitcakes and loonies.
I tell you what, I've been up half the night. This is absolutely marvellous.
Under growing pressure from within and without, David Cameron made this fateful promise.
We will give the British people a referendum with a very simple in or out choice: to stay in the European Union on these new terms or to come out altogether.
It was a massive gamble that EU leaders would give him a better deal and that British voters would back it. A gamble that was to go spectacularly wrong.
For years, UKIP could not break through with voters, and in 2006, David Cameron memorably mocked them.
I mean, UKIP, it's just a sort of, bunch of fruitcakes and loonies and closet racists, mostly.
A decade later, Nigel Farage would have the last laugh. With his fag rattle chuckle and love of a drink, Farage is not like most politicians, but the jovial demeanour disguised serious intent. A seriousness that hardened after he was badly injured in a plane crash in 2010, an experience that spurred him on. And over the next 5 years, UKIP made huge strides, coming first in the European elections in 2014. And Nigel Farage celebrated in a Westminster pub, of course. UKIP's campaign against EU migration, the European Union, mainstream politicians was cutting through, not only winning over disillusioned Tories, but many working-class Labour voters as well. David Cameron promised an EU referendum, in part to head off the UKIP advance.
The tragedy of all of this is the Liberal Democrats had made the arguments for proportional representation for about 40 years. When Clegg got the opportunity, he went for a referendum on AV, which wasn't actually proportional, it was preferential, which nobody understood, and you couldn't explain in a sentence, and that's why the referendum was lost. That was a disaster, one of the worst decisions of Clegg's career. But the answer to your question is, yes, of course. Clearly, this system is now bankrupt. It just doesn't work. And where's the incentive? If you're a socialist living in Esher, where's the incentive on a rainy Thursday afternoon to go and vote when you know there's no chance of your vote counting for anything? A lot of work was done by this. Blair said we should rethink the system back in the 90s. The Jenkins Commission came up with a proposal for AV+, which means 2 ballot papers. So wherever you live, you still get the man or woman that represents the town, which I agree is very important, but the second ballot paper lets you express a view, and any big view in this country would have representation in Parliament. Incidentally, Germany has been running on that system since 1945 in permanent coalition, and nobody would argue that Germany had been run badly.
So Nigel, why have you chosen Gloucester tonight?
Well, I've spoken recently in the last couple of years in Worcester, in parts of the Forest of Dean, in Cheltenham, in Bristol. In fact, the question ought to be, why haven't I come here before? It's the first time I've done a big event in Gloucester. I'm looking forward to it. We've got a very active local branch of UKIP here. We top the polls here in the European election. We've got local elections here next year. So there's a lot happening politically in Gloucester. But actually, this is really part of my tour around the 4 corners of the United Kingdom in the run-up to this referendum. And I'm saying to people, look, have a real long, hard think about this. You'll be told by politicians, you'll be told by big business and the CBI that we need to be part of this European Union. But just examine the facts. And that really, more than anything, what I'm doing is asking people, come and have a think. As far as the Leave campaign is concerned, there are 2 rival groups bidding to be the umbrella group, but don't forget one thing, UKIP is UKIP. We are the only political party committed to us leaving, and we will work with anybody to achieve that result.
Your biggest donor there isn't backing your campaign, he's backing the other one.
Well, that's fine. He's backing the same cause, isn't he? And he's not our biggest donor, he's one of 4 or 5 of our biggest donors, and I wish Mr Banks well with what he's doing. Look, what Banks is doing with Leave .eu is he's pushing a grassroots campaign that has now got 300,000 supporters. The other campaign going Leave is a much more Westminster-based and business-based campaign. And actually, I don't see the 2 of them being contradictory. I potentially see them being complementary. And if I can help in being an honest broker and bringing the 2 together, that's exactly what I'll do.
A political earthquake may sound like hyperbole, but however you describe it, victory for a party without an MP or a council leader is unprecedented. UKIP took the most votes and the most seats in the European Parliament elections. Here's how it looks. There were 73 seats up for grabs. UKIP took 24 seats, beating Labour, who took 20 seats. The Conservatives, who topped the poll 5 years ago, came third. And it was humiliation for the Liberal Democrats, who were beaten into joint 6th place by the Greens, along with the SNP and Plaid Cymru. The results here have been mirrored across Europe. We'll have more on that shortly from our Europe editor, Matt Fry, in Paris. But first, here's our political editor, Gary Gibbon. And just to warn you, his report does contain some flash photography.
Like a torch-wielding mob, they came in the night, hunting down the political establishment.
The People's Army that support UKIP
despite shed loads of abuse that have been thrown at us over the course of the last 3 or 4 weeks, went out, voted UKIP, and this party has done something that hasn't been done for over 100 years. We have won a national election in this country, and I'm immensely proud of that achievement. I really am. Bad publicity for the party, is it?
It's very good, Nigel, very good.
Nigel Farage himself gave a commentary on how he thought his victory would impact on British politics. And he started with the man who took him on in the one-on-one debates.
Clegg, I think, his position as a result of last night, I find it very difficult to believe that he will lead the Lib Dems into the next general election.
Nick Clegg's team is confident he won't be the first victim of the UKIP uprising. His team say they don't expect any more MPs to call for him to go. The self-proclaimed leader of the People's Army then mocked the Labour leader's lack of any popular touch.
As for Mr Miliband, it is difficult to think of somebody who is more out of touch with his own working-class voters.
I think many people who are voting for UKIP were saying we're really discontented with the way the country works and we're asking whether politics can answer that. I intend to show we can.
Nigel Farage's army nearly chased Labour down to 3rd place in this election. He said the leader who'd got off lightest from last night was the Prime Minister.
And as for David Cameron, well, in some ways, he emerges amongst the other leaders, I would say, the least scathed.
UKIP had already eaten into the Tory vote. The fresh chunks torn out of Labour's vote were privately gloated over by Tory strategists.
This is a kicking of the major parties, and that perhaps you're completely out of touch on the issues that people really care about.
Well, people use elections like this to send messages to the government, and the message on Europe I absolutely receive and understand, which is people want change in Europe.
The response we're getting, and I'm watching the television interviews, they all look a little bit like goldfish that have just been tipped out of the bowl onto the floor, desperately gasping for air and clinging on to the comfort blanket that is, this is a protest vote. Well, I would say this. It's beginning to look like a bit of a permanent protest. That a lot of these people have decided they are UKIP voters and they're going to stay with us.
And that is the hounded major party leader's darkest fear. History suggests that voters come back to the mothership parties in the general election. But times change. UKIP now hopes to prove its permanence by moving its army onto Newark and the by-election next week.
Good afternoon. Go down there. Thank you. Afternoon. Hi there. Hello. Good afternoon, everybody. I thought I'd better come out and say something because I could see that you were all in a great mass here, and I apologise for being slow with coming down. You know, you want to ask my views on Europe, don't you? Let me tell you where I've got to, which is that I've made up my mind, and I want to stress, because I can see that we got lots of people here, we've got a huge crowd here. I want to stress that this is not about whether you love Europe or not. I love Brussels. I used to live in Brussels. Fantastic city, wonderful place. And I love European culture and civilization. I consider it to be the greatest civilization this planet has ever produced. And we are all products, or most of us here are products of that civilization. And it is a fantastic thing. But there should be no confusion between the wonders of Europe and holidays in Europe and fantastic food and friendships and whatever else you get from Europe with a political project that is basically going on now for decades, which Britain has been a member of since 1975, and I now think is in real danger of getting out of proper democratic control. That is my view, and it's a view I've held for a long time. I've written a huge number of articles about it. And when people talk about sovereignty, this is not something that is possessed by politicians. Sovereignty is people's ability, the ability of the public to control their lives and to make sure that the people they elect are able to pass the laws that matter to them. And the trouble is with Europe that is being very greatly eroded, and you're seeing it more and more over employment, over border controls, over human rights, over all sorts of stuff. And you've got a supreme judicial body in the European Court of Justice that projects down on this entire 500 million people territory, a single unified judicial order from which there is absolutely no recourse and no comebacks. And in my view, that has been getting out of control.
In another very serious day of Brexit commentary, Boris Johnson said this, and Gordon Brown said this.
Amy Winehouse. And she comes up to Mandela and said, Mr. Mandela, he said, my husband and you have a great deal in common. Both of you have spent a long time in prison.
Former Mayor of London Boris Johnson rolled out his Vote Leave Battle Bus tour, hoping to convince voters to back Team Brexit in the upcoming EU referendum. And he sounded very down with the people.
I want to talk to the crowd. I want to talk to everybody here. Can I just say thank you very much for coming out? Thank you, everybody. Now, isn't it wonderful to see our battle bus, which is not funded by the taxpayer of our country? Do you think we can do it? I think we can do it.
You, the British people, will decide.
This is a once-in-a-generation vote.
This is the once-in-a-lifetime decision.
This is a decision, a once-and-for-all decision. It's not. We will not be taking a decision like this again in our lifetime.
There won't be another referendum on Europe. This is it.
This is a one-off choice between staying in or leaving completely.
If we as a country decide to quit, then we're out for good. There's no going back.
There's no second vote.
There will be no second referendum.
No, I don't think we need a second referendum.
The referendum is clear and has to be accepted, and we can't have a rerun of the question that was put to the country.
I say that with all the conviction and all the sincerity I have. It's so important, this decision.
If we vote to leave, then we will leave.
If people vote to leave, we leave.
You vote to leave, we're out. That's it. We're going.
Whatever the result is, we have to respect it.
We respect the result of this referendum.
And Parliament should respect that referendum result. We've said that all the way through.
Whatever the British people decide, we work together constructively to make that happen.
I don't think it would be right for Parliament to try and unravel the decision that the public have made.
The British Parliament should deliver what is required of that decision of the British people.
I am not going to waste time, precious time, resisting Brexit from happening.
We will leave the European Union on the 29th of March 2019.
We'd be out of the single market.
We're leaving the single market.
Right.
We're leaving the customs union.
In March 2019, we will cease to be full members of the single market and the customs union.
You have 2 years to negotiate. At the end of those 2 years, you are out, and you have to operate under World Trade Organization rules.
No deal will be better than a bad deal.
Yes, you said that repeatedly.
Yes.
And it will be the final decision.
And if anybody's in any doubt, we are going to leave the European Union on the 29th.
You have the charisma of a damp rag and the appearance of a low-grade bank clerk. And the question that I want to ask, that we're all going to ask is, who are you? I'd never heard of you. Nobody in Europe had ever heard of you. I would like to ask you, President, who voted for you? And what mechanism? Oh, I know democracy is not popular with you lot. And what mechanism do the peoples of Europe have to remove you? Is this European democracy? Well, I sense, though, that you're competent and capable and dangerous. And I have no doubt that it's your intention to be the quiet assassin of European democracy and of the European nation states. You appear to have a loathing for the very concept of the existence of nation states. Perhaps that's because you come from Belgium, which of course is pretty much a non-country. But since you took over, we've seen Greece reduced to nothing more than a protectorate. Sir, you have no legitimacy in this job at all, and I can say with confidence that I can speak on behalf of the majority of the British people in saying we don't know you, we don't want you, and the sooner you're put out to grass, the better.
Yeah, I can do. Hold on, just get the baby into safety.
The opportunity to come here and find out information, and if you are perhaps undecided, come here and we can really help you make up your mind so that you know the best thing to do is to vote to leave on the 23rd of June. Thank you.
And a final thing, this is also a vote leave because we've joined forces. So this is us all together to win this enormous battle. To our shop.
Side like to show they're working hard at street level. In Gloucester, they've set up a shop offering campaign material.
I don't think we should be in the EU. No, not looking after ourselves.
They believe their vision of Britain freed from the EU is striking a chord.
Every type, age of person, ladies and gentlemen, we've had here, honestly, and the enthusiasm and the belief that they want to back the Leave campaign is I mean, I felt that, but certainly in Gloucester and Gloucestershire more widely, it's for Leave at the moment, without a doubt.
British Bulldog backing out in Gloucester.
Got balloons, badges, car stickers, whatever you need, come to the side of the Union Jack.
Among the stallholders at this car boot sale, one selling political change.
People are worried about the future. It's as simple as that. They've got no confidence in the European Union. They don't have a great deal of confidence in Westminster either.
And one message rings out loud and clear.
I was a teacher for 10 years, and I think a lot of people that I do speak with, their main concern is frontline services and the fact that people are coming over, they're using the services, they haven't paid into the pot, and that just doesn't seem fair.
A more subdued campaign then, but the same themes as both sides set out their stall one final time. Robin Markwell, BBC Points West in Gloucester.
Generation to vote to stay in the European Union. It comes after a former advisor to the Prime Minister says Mr Cameron had been told 4 years ago that it would be impossible to meet the government's migration targets. Our Deputy Political Editor John Pinar reports.
When this thing comes out, you know it's serious. The campaign's being called a battle between hearts that say leave and heads for remain. Today, David Cameron played on both, saying don't risk the economy, think of the children.
It will just be you in that polling booth, just you taking a decision that will affect your future, your children's future, your grandchildren's future. It is stronger if we stay. If we leave, we put it at risk, and there is no going back.
And Leavers believe they're the ones who draw the crowd. Nigel Farage's attack on migration strike a sour note with opponents, but he doesn't care, warning today of strain on schools.
This is what people are going to vote on in the referendum, getting back control of our borders, easing the pressure on public services.
Tonight, the rivals have arrived at Wembley Arena for a big set piece of the campaign.
But just 13 months later, another electoral surprise. The unthinkable happened.
And the answer is, we're out.
There was no plan B. David Cameron had led us out of the EU by mistake.
Decision made. Britain will leave the EU. The West turned out in high numbers to vote. This morning, news of the result was both celebrated.
Remain or leave. Last Friday's Brexit vote was a shock.
They voted to leave Europe, but decided to stay in the pub to celebrate in Gloucester.
We are the cradle of democracy, and we've just exercised the very act of democracy.
I haven't stopped crying for half an hour. My mum and dad would be so proud of the fact that we are now proud, free people.
At his continental-themed cafe in Gloucester, Paul Soden celebrated through the night. There is, he claims, no danger ahead.
But now we're free and independent, I believe that we've got a chance to actually be happy, go out and trade globally with the world and be the player that we should have been for years.
It looks, smells and sounds the same, but today dawn broke over a different West Country.
UKIP's leader, Nigel Farage, said he was thrilled that the country had decided to break free from what he called a failing, dying European Union.
17 million people have said we must leave the European Union. We now need a Brexit government. A government that gets on with the job. A government that begins the renegotiation of our trade relationship.
Nigel Farage is standing aside as the UKIP leader. He says it's job done.
He told supporters he'd achieved his goal when Britain voted to leave the European Union.
During the referendum campaign, I said, I want my country back. And what I'm saying today is I want my life back. And it begins right now. Thank you.
The man with a pint. He reached parts of Britain other politicians didn't, inspiring some, angering others.
The UK has voted to leave the European Union in the most seismic decision in generations. In the last hour, David Cameron has announced he will resign. 52% of people who cast a ballot made the momentous decision to leave the EU. A short time ago, the Prime Minister gave an emotional address explaining his decision.
I fought this campaign in the only way I know how, which is to say directly and passionately what I think and feel, head, heart and soul. I held nothing back. I was absolutely clear about my belief that Britain is stronger, safer and better off inside the European Union. And I made clear the referendum was about this and this alone, not the future of any single politician, including myself. But the British people have made a very clear decision to take a different path. And as such, I think the country requires fresh leadership to take it in this direction.
Leave campaigners are jubilant at the result, saying it sends a stinging message to the European Union's political elites.
Across town from where Europe's leaders were meeting, a British winner in Brussels today.
Well, the next step.
Nigel Farage preparing to savour his moment of triumph over the EU and its institutions.
The head of the European Commission and Nigel Farage share a quiet word before bad-tempered public exchanges.
I said that I wanted to lead a campaign to get Britain to leave the European Union. You all laughed at me. Well, I have to say, you're not laughing now, are you?
The posters of Mr. Farage showing refugees like in Nazi propaganda because he copied it at that moment.
He replied with scorn of his own.
I know that virtually none of you have ever done a proper job in your lives.
The chamber had to be called to order.
The reason you're so angry has been perfectly clear from all the angry exchanges this morning. You, as a political project, are in denial. You're in denial that your currency is failing.
A divisive rabble-rouser to some, a hero to others. UKIP without Nigel Farage will lose some of its colour. Where the party heads next without its public face and with the referendum done is a question for his successor. Ben Wright, BBC News, Westminster.
For others, June the 23rd is considered Independence Day. This Gloucester pub is holding a party for Leave supporters. They started celebrating at lunchtime.
Shot! Well done. That was long called Juncker.
Their city saw one of the West's biggest votes for Brexit. For them, it can't come soon enough.
Tonight is a celebration, certainly for me and the people who are coming, of all the hard work that the people put in. It was a collective that just came together without any political organisation behind it.
I think people were just incredulous at the way it's gone. I don't think people would believe now, a year later, that we've actually done very little about it. Let's not dilly-dally anymore, Mrs May. Let's implement the decision of the British people. Otherwise, I think you'll face the wrath of the people of Gloucester and the people of the UK.
They'll keep some bubbly for when Britain actually leaves, however long it takes.
There are just minutes to go before we leave the EU. For some, it's time to celebrate. We're with those partying into the night to say au revoir to Brussels.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Is that really it after 40 years? Thank you, Ryan.